All right, welcome back. Let's go ahead and see where the Wikipedia guys are going to send us today. Give us something good. Cancer Alley. Eesh, that sounds ominous. Cancer Alley is a regional nickname given to an 85-mile stretch of land along the Mississippi River between Baton Rouge and New Orleans. Contains over 200 petrochemical plants and refineries. As of 2012, this area accounted for 25% of the petrochemical production in the United States. Wow. By the 70s, the EPA documented serious water and air pollution. The environmentalists consider this region a sacrifice zone. God, you know how morbid the term sacrifice zone sounds, where rates of cancer caused by air pollution exceed the federal government's own limits. So an 85-mile stretch of land between Baton Rouge and New Orleans, we are just okay with the fact that it produces far more air pollution than what our own government would allow for. And we're going to call it a sacrifice zone. Community leaders have led the charge in protesting the expansion of the industry in Cancer Alley. Cancer Alley, in a larger sense, extends further west along the Gulf Coast into Texas, into the area of Freeport. Take a look at this picture. This is a mound of oil drums near the Baton Rouge ExxonMobil refinery from 1972. I mean, look at all these drums. It's no wonder that this area is known as Cancer Alley. That's awful. All right, so I'm not going to bore you by reading. Let's skim. I'm gonna go ahead and skim through. Let's take a quick look at this picture. So as you can see here, I mean, this whole area down here is just known as Cancer Alley. That's so scary. The government is aware and has done nothing to rectify that. And what's crazier is the fact that you've got a very populated area of Louisiana right here, including New Orleans. I mean, not that it's okay to be anywhere, but you would think if it was more rural. But I mean, we're talking about in major hubs. Cancer Alley followed an oil and gas boom around the time of World War II. A number of refineries spawned along the Mississippi River near the Gulf Coast. I mean, I understand that there's a lot of drilling going on, so I mean, that's not too crazy to think about this area as being seen as a boon, especially in relation to accessibility to the Gulf. So it sounds like many of these facilities were previously located in major population centers, such as Baton Rouge and New Orleans, but during the 50s, many sought to migrate to less densely populated places. I mean, that makes sense. Many were located to the small communities along the river between New Orleans and Baton Rouge, often located on former plantation sites adjacent to communities with significant or majority African American populations. By the 70s, the area had a proliferation of plants producing vinyl chloride, nitrogen fertilizers, and chlorine. By the 70s, air and water pollution was noted by federal agencies. An EPA report found 66 pollutants in New Orleans drinking water and 31 lethal chemicals in the air of Plaquemine. I don't know if I'm saying that right. I know that's a town or a city in Louisiana. In 1976, Coast Guard divers retrieving sediment samples from a bayou suffered second-degree burns on their hands. Imagine that. These guys are down there in the water getting sediment samples, and it's so polluted they're burning their hands. And then by the early 80s, residents of the neighborhood of Good Hope had grown accustomed to regular fires at a local refinery and developed their own informal evacuation plan. Despite the known problems, the petrochemical industry in the area continued unabated and even continued expanding. Wow. By the late 80s, they're noticing that plants and animals are becoming less common. So it was in 1988 is when the locals started to refer to it as Cancer Alley. And that's when it later grew to encompass the 85-mile stretch. Wow, that's so freaking sad, man. Industrial plants emitting toxic waste in Louisiana continued to proliferate into the 21st century. According to EPA data, the number of industrial plants in Louisiana that reported their toxic releases grew from 255 to 320 from 88 to 2017. 25% increase. Whereas in everywhere else in the country, it dropped by 16%. So take that into consideration. In this one area, toxic levels grew by 25%, where nationwide, toxic levels had actually dropped by over 15%. And so in this last paragraph, it talks about a plant that was created by DuPont to manufacture chloroprene, the main ingredient in neoprene, in Laplace, Louisiana. They sold it in 2015 to a Japanese chemical company, Denka. The area immediately adjacent to the neoprene plant in St. John the Baptist Parish has been recognized by the EPA as having a likelihood of its residents getting cancer from air pollution over 700 times the national average. Oh my gosh, that is nuts. According to the EPA, it emits 99% of the nation's chloroprene pollution. So this one plant emits 99% of the nation's chloroprene pollution. And we're okay with that. Man, this is scary when you think about it. When you talk about living in a country and the government and the systems we have put in place, the idea that an area is so well known to cause cancer, so polluted, and yet we're okay with that. Community organizing, sort of reading through this, just skimming through, it seems like the industries have sort of come together to target lower income, mostly African American communities with the promise of stimulating the economy and creating all types of jobs for each area, but it doesn't seem like that's being fulfilled. Economic stimulation and job creation that is promised with the proposal of each new plant in the area has never been fulfilled, while a tiny minority of full-time industry jobs are filled by community members who bear the brunt of the pollution burden. So think about that. I mean, this area, you're working in these plants, you're creating jobs, but at the end of the day, those workers are the ones who are dealing with this pollution on a day-to-day basis. In St. Gabriel of Iberville Parish, there are now 30 large petrochemical plants within a 10-mile radius, and only 9% of the full-time industry jobs in the city are held by local residents, and at least 1 in 4 residents live in poverty. Wow. So really the idea is that these have started to organize, start lobbying to get these grants to go into these areas with the promise of economic growth and job creation, but yet that's really not what they're doing at all. So now we're getting down to the criticism. EPA in both 16 and 20 reported that those residing in Cancer Alley are exposed to more than 10 times the level of health risk from air pollutants than other people in that state. I mean, that's great, but like, what are we doing? On January 27, 2021, President Joe Biden signed an executive order regarding environmental justice and specifically cited Cancer Alley as a hard hit area. Okay, but what are we doing? Louisiana's Chemical Association President Greg Bowser responded to President Biden's remarks on the region, refuting claims that residents of the industrial corridor have a higher risk of developing cancer in multiple articles. Furthermore, he cited Louisiana tumor registry data to support his claims. The LTR claims that there has not been an increase in cancer deaths connected to industrial pollution. Okay, so on the one hand, you've got the EPA saying that this area is incredibly toxic. The levels of what's being produced in this area are so much worse than other areas, and yet the Louisiana tumor registry is saying that there has not been an increase in cancer deaths. Now, the question is, and again, I'm just making this up, but I mean, at the end of the day, does it have anything to do with the area that it's in? A lower income? Do they have access to the same sort of health care? Are their health issues being cited the same way? I mean, who's to know? On March 2nd, 2021, the United Nations Human Rights Committee discussed the continued industrial products along the Mississippi River. I mean, so it's so bad that the UN is getting involved. As of 2019, activists and locals have disputed the conclusions of the Louisiana Tumor Registry, asserting that the tracks used cover large areas and the data does not allow for specific locations adjacent to chemical plants. Okay, so they're basically saying that the data is more general and it's not specific to this area, so there's no way for you to really know. They're also talking about COVID-19 pandemic could have thrown off some of these numbers. But I mean, again, the information goes way back into the 60s. All right, so let's get into the current. What are we doing now? So, I mean, it sounds like if you're reading through this, it's mostly the EPA is really starting to lean on these companies to do things. You've got civil rights actions going in because of the economic, or should I say, racial background of these areas. In 2000, so just last year, the EPA, or 2 years ago, the EPA announced a new rule targeting more than 200 chemical plants across the U.S., requiring them to cut enough toxic emissions to reduce cancer risk for people living in those areas by 96%. So that's great. But in February of 2025, the Trump administration planned to dismiss the lawsuit against Denka in line with its plan to eliminate DEI programs, including environmental justice. Wow. So the idea is that there was a lawsuit against Denka for targeting this area because of the majority African American makeup. And the Trump administration decided to throw away that lawsuit. And so now, we're talking about that. It goes back. This goes back to the environmental racism of the understanding that, these areas are being targeted by companies because they're mostly African American, because they're mostly lower income. And so that is in essence what environmental racism is. It's not worrying as much about these areas because they're deemed to be less important by these companies. 75% of Black Americans are reported to more likely live in communities dubbed as fence line communities in close proximity to sites of pollution and industry. Wow, that's terrible. It's just really sad when you think about this. This is an area I've never heard of this area. I would imagine if you live in Louisiana or in surrounding areas, this may be something that you've heard of, but I've literally never heard of this. So it's really mind blowing to know that something is so recognized, so known by the government, seems to be so toxic, and yet nothing was really being done about it. I mean, there's being initiatives put down, but ultimately these companies are making the decision to fight it tooth and nail. So now, in the environmental impact. Now, this makes sense because of its location near the Gulf of Mexico. You have to deal with natural disasters such as hurricanes. So, for example, when Hurricane Katrina caused almost 11 million gallons of oil to spill into the water near New Orleans. Hurricane Harvey in 2017 caused power outages that led to unrefrigerated chemicals. So, I mean, the concern is, even if these areas are able to limit their pollution, because of the awful storms that they get, any number of issues can cause these areas to again pollute the water and the people around it. It's I don't know what you do. The normal route of the government controlling it and making things safer doesn't seem to be working. So you have these groups that are advocating for this area in an attempt to get things changed. Man, you got to hope that this can be taken care of, because if you live in this area, or you have an area even like this, if you live in this area, you have to be scared to death, not only for yourself, but your kids. That's a scary thing, man. I'm sorry, it's kind of a morbid pool today, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's bringing to light this area that I knew nothing about, and it goes to show you that there's so many things in this country, in this world, that you just don't know about. And so, man, I appreciate you guys stopping in today. We learned something new, and I'll check back with you guys soon. Appreciate you subscribing if you're interested in this content, and come back for more.